European leaders are gathering in Brussels for an emergency summit. On the agenda is boosting defense spending and shoring up support for Ukraine. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen has proposed a plan that she calls rearm Europe. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will also be attending the summit. The meeting comes at a pivotal moment for Europe as the United States upends its close alliance with the continent and pauses all support for Ukraine. Well, let's go straight to Brussels, where our DW Brussels Bureau Chief Alexander van Namen is standing by. Alexander, with the U.S. stopping its support for Ukraine, how high are the stakes for this EU summit?
Well, Terry, the stakes are incredibly high here in Brussels. There is no doubt about that. We have been speaking with many EU officials and with politicians, and all of them have been stressing that there is a sense of urgency, that there has been a change of the mindset after this contentious meeting in the Oval Office, that many member states of the European Union and their leaders they know that they cannot rely anymore on the U.S. protection, so they need to do more for their own defense, and they also have to step up their efforts to support Ukraine. So the stakes are very high. We also heard from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who's told us that actually there is no room for failure here, that it is the moment for the European Union to step up.
Well, U.S. military support for Ukraine has served as a crucial lifeline to Kyiv, of course, in its fight against Russia's invasion. Billions of dollars worth of equipment, either en route or on order, will no longer be delivered. The U.S. government's decision to suspend intelligence sharing for Ukraine as well is also a major blow. Let's have a closer look.
It is perhaps the biggest blow yet to Ukraine's war effort. The United States CIA director confirming it has cut off US intelligence sharing to Ukraine, depriving its frontline forces of key information in its fight against Russia. Western allies, including the UK, have been banned from sharing Washington's knowledge, further limiting US support alongside pausing its military aid to Kyiv. Previous lifelines from its biggest military backer. The US has provided more than $64 billion, topping Europe's spend. But all of that was before Donald Trump took office and before his dramatic White House row with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The US provides about 30% of Ukraine's weapons, including many of its most powerful. Among them, air defences like the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System, or NASAMS, Hawk missiles and Patriot missiles, all vital in shooting down Russian drone and missile attacks. The Patriot is the US's most advanced air defence system and is key in protecting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. But it's not cheap. An interceptor missile costs around €3.8 million per round. The launches cost about $9.4 million each. Ukraine will now have to carefully ration its remaining supplies. The US also provides key ground defence equipment, such as Abrams tanks, Bradley vehicles, howitzers and HIMARS rocket launchers. HIMARS rockets have been particularly effective in allowing Ukraine to hit munitions depots behind Russian lines. The US also supplies smaller weapons and ammunition, like Javelin anti-tank missiles, considered crucial in stopping Russia's advance. It's not just the lack of new weapons set to stymie Ukraine's fight. Many parts required to fix damaged equipment and specialist munitions are only available from the US. Ukraine can keep fighting for now, with military experts estimating current supplies will last until summer.
Our Brussels Bureau Chief is still with us. Alexander, making up for the withdrawal of U.S. military support is a monumental task. Can European countries fill the gap?
Well, it will be difficult. We should not be naive about that. Of course, we have seen in recent days more and more countries within the bloc, but also outside the European Union, come forward and promise to increase their support for Ukraine. Sweden, for instance, has promised to deliver air defense systems directly to Ukraine. Other countries like Norway or the UK, for instance, countries outside the bloc, they're also saying that they want to approve massive packages for Ukraine. But it's not only about the amount of military aid that the US provided to Kyiv, it's also about certain capabilities that Europe does not have at their disposal. So that is a big problem. And also the decision by the Trump administration to stop sharing intelligence, at least to a high extent, with Kyiv is a very concerning decision for Ukraine and also for the European Union. So in the short term, it's certainly not realistic that Europeans alone can fill the gap.
As you're speaking, Alexander, I just want to remind our viewers that we're looking now at live pictures from Brussels where that summit is taking place. Ukraine's president, Zelenskyy is standing next to Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission Chief. Maybe we can listen in a bit.
Strong signal to Ukrainian people, to Ukrainian warriors, to civilians, to all our families. And it's great that we are not alone. We feel it
Just
and we know it.
Just a tiny bit
Thank
there
you
from
so
Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Alexander, last week, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tabled a plan that could unlock around 800 billion euros in defense investments over the next 4 years. How realistic is it that this sum will be achieved?
Well, I think it is realistic. The question is how quickly it can be achieved. And we heard just from the Ukrainian president, who is grateful, stressing that they have the feeling that they are not alone. But of course, we have to talk about pace when it comes to supporting Ukraine. It will take time to achieve the goal of ramping up Europe's own defense and supporting Ukraine. But when we speak about one of the tools that Ursula von der Leyen presented to member states, the plan for the European Commission to borrow money at the international markets up to 150 billion euros on behalf of member states who want to ramp up their weapons production. That could happen very quickly, and you don't even need all of them to be on board with that. So this is a measure that could be implemented very quickly. The rest of the money, it could take time to get their approval, to relax the very strict fiscal rules for the European Union, to take advantage of other tools. So this is not going to happen very quickly.
Alexander, thank you very much. Our Brussels Bureau Chief, Alexander van Namen, there as this emergency summit gets underway in Brussels.
Thomas Wiegold is a defense and security policy journalist and joins us now from Berlin. Welcome back to DW. Now, military experts, we heard it there, say U.S. supplies will run out by the summer. What happens after that?
Well, it's not a sudden decline. It won't be that Ukraine is fighting and sometime in June they say now it's over. It will start, as we heard already, it will start pretty fast because they have to ration the ammunition they have. They will run low in summer. Part of it can be replaced by European efforts, but not all. And the main problem will be air defense. As we've seen just before, they need Patriot missiles to establish a certain level of air defense for their infrastructure. And if this runs out, there's a big, big problem.
Mm-hmm. But it's not only hardware, is it? The U.S. has also stopped intelligence sharing with Ukraine. France just now offered to step in. Can that make up for what is lost? Or is Ukraine now partially in the dark when fighting its aggressor?
Well, that's a big question. European allies can deliver some of the intelligence the US has been delivering so far, but the crucial point here is speed. The targeting cycle, as it's called in the military, is to speed up the reaction from finding a target and delivering a blow to this target. So how fast you can react on the intelligence you have makes a crucial difference. And the problem is that the system the US has established, this is well established, this is working, and the French and other European allies, they have to work with the Ukrainians to make their intelligence as fast and as reliable as the US intelligence so far and before. And how fast this can happen, that's a big question.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the wake of that historic falling out in the White House, European leaders responded by stepping up. You mentioned that they can do something, but can they realistically fill the void left by the US, a giant one, in Ukraine and in Europe as a whole?
In the end, they can't at the moment, and not for the time being. I've mentioned air defense. There so far is no European system that could match the capabilities of the Patriot air defense system. The German IRIS-T SLM system is in the range well below. Diehl, the producer of the IRIS-T system, is developing a new SLX system, but this will be some time until this is available and operational. So for the time being, no, there is no European answer to that.
We talk about many proposals that will boost European defense in the long term, but maybe briefly, if you can, what about short-term measures that need to be implemented now, especially to support Ukraine?
Well, the short-term measures might be ramping up what is available in Europe, ramping up production even more than it's been planned until now.
That was Thomas Wiegold, defense and security policy journalist. Always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
After the showdown in the White House last week and the Trump administration's announcement it is cutting aid for Ukraine, how important is this summit for Ukraine? I asked DW's correspondent Max Sander earlier.
Right. I mean, we also remember what happened in the White House just a couple of days ago. I think the memory is still very fresh, especially here in Ukraine. The dispute that the conference that went off the rails is one thing. The actions, the consequences that followed in the last couple of days, including yesterday, were another with severe consequences for Ukraine. We saw the U.S. stopping military aid deliveries to Ukraine. We learned of the halting of intelligence sharing for the Ukrainian military provided by the U.S., which will make the life for soldiers fighting the war on the battlefield very difficult. Now, the Europeans have been very important partners of the Ukrainians ever since the beginning of the war. They stepped up gradually. They are the second largest donor of military aid. They are the largest donors of aid when you take everything into account, including humanitarian assistance. And the Europeans have been following Trump leading up his comments on Ukraine, leading up to the inauguration, his comments on NATO, him criticizing the Europeans not doing enough, not spending enough for NATO. And they have also been watching Washington, the situation, the relationship between Kyiv and Washington sour. So they are aware that more needs to be done, and Ukraine is turning to them exactly for that at the moment. So this summit is an opportunity for Ukraine to get together with the Europeans, hopefully find more concrete steps towards peace. Although we already heard in that story just there that all 27 leaders of the bloc will be present, and not everybody is a very staunch supporter of Ukraine.
Germany's leadership is also headed to Brussels, the outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz, that is. For more, let's talk to DW political correspondent Matthew Moore. Matthew, what does the German side want from today's summit?
Nicole, the key word today about this summit, this emergency summit, is really about unity and European unity. Since Donald Trump won election, the phrase that we've heard so often in Europe is Europe united. And the aim of this summit today is to discuss upping defence spending across Europe, easing rules on budgets so that countries can do that. But really what we're going to see is Olaf Scholz there representing Germany at this meeting, the Chancellor of Germany. But really behind the scenes, we've also seen lots of unofficial meetings with Friedrich Merz, the man who is somewhat the shadow chancellor. He won the elections just over a week ago. And we've seen a very unusual sight, and that is him in Brussels over the last few hours, meeting Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, Ursula von der Leyen, the defence head of the European Commission, and senior leaders really, but unofficially and behind the scenes. And his message and his whole election campaign was about really delivering Germany to a leadership role in Europe. In the last few hours here in Berlin, he announced massive plans to loosen debt rules here in Germany. Germany's really tight debt rules to ramp up military spending, which has been applauded for across Europe. So really, to come back to the key question, the question that Germany is really aiming to get out of this summit and in the coming days and weeks is to unite Europe and really return Germany to a kind of leadership role on the continent.
Now that you mentioned Friedrich Merz pulling the strings behind the scenes there, in a way, the French president even referenced him in his speech last night on extending France's nuclear deterrent. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Our nuclear deterrent protects us. It is complete, sovereign, fully French. Since 1964, it has always explicitly played a role in the preservation of peace and security in Europe. But answering to the historic call of the future German Chancellor, I decided to open the strategic debate on the protection through our deterrent of our allies on the European continent.
So not yet the Chancellor, and already heavily influencing the European agenda. Matthew, where does Friedrich Merz stand on this issue?
This idea of France or the United Kingdom sharing its nuclear umbrella with the rest of Europe is actually not a new idea. Macron has mentioned it numerous times over the years, but whenever he's mentioned it, it's often been dismissed by political leaders. So Olaf Scholz has dismissed it. And the reason that Olaf Scholz would dismiss it is he'd say, we shouldn't doubt America, the United States' commitment to NATO. However, the fact that this discussion has been raised again, Nicole, just shows you that there are serious doubts about that commitment. Immediately after the election, Friedrich Merz took this issue up, willingly took this issue up and said, we need to discuss it. There are lots of complex questions that arise. He said, among them, who holds the suitcase? Who decides when there should be a nuclear response? So it's not just something that can be done casually. And so there are massive issues and complex questions that arise from it. But the very fact that Friedrich Merz hasn't dismissed it outright and has acknowledged that there should be a discussion of it marks a big sea change in the tone, in the attitudes here in Europe about what is necessary going forward. Having said that, it's very early days, but the fact that Macron mentioned it again last night and the fact that Friedrich Merz, the man who's likely to be the next Chancellor of Germany, has said that he's willing to have this conversation just shows you how far Europe has come.
DW's Matthew Moore. Thanks so much, Matthew.